All right. And there we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of this one is our Labs Open Office Hour. This week we have Kelly Shipman, our resident up and coming Unreal Engine expert, and I suppose as an aside, virtual production sort of expert as well. I think is that kind of the main focus of what you're doing with Unreal? Okay. Mm-hmm. Hold just a moment. It looks like your audio is not going out. One moment, please. Can I get a test from you real quick?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay, so start over.
Okay. So, yes, we're doing a lot of virtual production stuff, not because that's what we intended to, but like as we started saying, hey, we're doing Unreal, the
Mm-hmm.
virtual production community was like, hey, we need this kind of information. So it kind of just went that way.
Okay,
That
that's really
we,
cool stuff.
I mean, we already had a lot of customers looking for that kind of information, so that was on our radar, but
Mm-hmm.
we had a resounding uh, approval from that community for more information. So we're like, all right.
Yeah. So, how does it? How do you test that sort of thing? What are you looking for, especially at home? Like, do you get to actually kind of play around and like, oh, I'm dancing inside a halo or something?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have a green screen,
Mm.
so that kind of limits. I did some experiment with using a software to remove the background.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay.
that kind of worked. It just adds a lot more stuff. But in my testing and playing around with just using a camera input into it, that didn't have a huge performance impact on
Oh.
the scene, anyways. So
Okay.
it's not a big deal that I don't have access to that directly.
Oh, all right.
um, which is convenient because then at the 12 test beds I have up in labs, I don't have to have those connected, each one of those connected to cameras and green screens
Oh,
and all that kind of stuff for once the tests are automated. Um,
awesome.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. So I'm curious. I know part of your learning is going to be around like a benchmark, right? How is
Mhm.
that going?
That's going good. um, the biggest hurdle to that is just my lack of programming knowledge and just trying to
Oh.
learn like how to do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I ask like Matt, like, what's some tip you have for this type of thing? And he rattles off this long thing. And I'm like, I don't understand any of the words you just said. So, okay, cool. But I'll have that as a reference to look up each of those lines that you just gave me and see what they mean. Um, but it's going all right. Right now, I'm mainly just focusing on doing everything somewhat manually,
Okay.
and like writing down, okay, Unreal will output certain information to a log file.
Okay.
Um, and so I know like when I hit start on something like um, building shaders, let's say, when I hit start, it shows in the log file a timestamp of when that was started and then a timestamp of when it ended. And there's a whole bunch of information between. So as long as
Oh.
I know what those lines are to look for, I can just open up the log file, find them, see what the timestamps are, calculate the time. Um, so eventually I'll be able to have something automated that can read for that and then just give me a time.
That's pretty cool. So what kind of like I guess what kind of things are you looking for, or have you the input that you've been receiving? Like what matters for virtual production?
For virtual production, main things are um, frame performance, like how much
Mhm.
stuff can you put in the scene and still get a reasonable frame rate. For virtual production, um, most everything is capped at 24, 30 frames per second,
Okay,
whatever, whatever they're
like
trying to shoot at.
broadcast.
Yeah,
Okay,
like there's no sense in rendering 120 frames per second if your output is only 30. So
sure.
try to get it close to that, and then you can actually lock the frame rate.
Oh,
Especially if you're using quadro cards, there's a sync card in there that you can
hmm,
get that with specific hardware will only render with the frame capture of the camera.
Okay.
So that way your target is refreshing the same time that your camera is taking an image and not anything else.
Oh, that's
That
cool.
way your camera's not going to capture half redraw of the screen and have some tearing or anything else like that.
Nice.
So they're not looking for FPS measure per se, even though that's
Okay.
the statistic I used for my benchmark.
Uh-huh.
But it's more of like the more you put in, the better this does. So therefore, that means if this card has a higher frames per second than this card in this test, that means I can put more stuff into the scene and still get my 30 FPS with this card.
Okay.
Kind of how
Okay.
they're looking at it. It's just a different way of looking at what the FPS means to a person.
Okay.
Because really, high frame rates only matter to competitive gamers. Like
Sure.
beyond that, they're worthless.
As a metric, right? Like
As a metric, yeah.
or as I suppose as like a benchmark comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
Okay.
why we don't use games for any of our benchmarks. It doesn't, there's too many other variables going on. It doesn't mean
Right.
something like, I mean, yeah, you can guess that it has more horsepower. Like,
Right.
we kind of knew that just from looking at the spec sheet. Like, we didn't run the game.
Yeah.
But like, what does it actually mean for production use?
Right.
That's why a lot of even the benchmarks I did publish for frame rate, they're like on a RTX 3090, it was hitting like, 20 to 40 FPS. Like
Okay.
the beefiest card that we have is because like that's the kind of stuff that people are doing. Like they want to know, can I throw everything at this card?
Does it run Crisis?
Yeah, exactly. So on the graphic side, that's what we're kind of looking at for. On the CPU side, which is where most of my time is this week, and for the next kind of several weeks probably, is CPU that's building shaders, building lighting, which building lighting is less important for ray tracing applications as opposed to like the old traditional rasterized games, which is still important. A lot of people still do that because it's cheaper to render, it's easier to deal with, and all that kind of stuff. So that's still important. And then compiling the engine from source code, which is a big deal for the machine learning people, because they're going to take the source code, make modifications so they can input all their machine learning hooks in there and have TensorFlow connected to what's happening in the game. So they need to know that kind of stuff. And then what's the other one? Oh, like packaging up a final product. Like
like the executable or whatever.
Yeah. And that's all CPU bound tests. So
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out how do we measure that. Some of these tests take a long time. Like on a 3990 Threadripper, could still push half hour or more for a faster test. And so then I try to run that on a 10700, and it's going to be a couple hours to get it done. Like,
jeez.
Figuring out where that balance is between the speed to get an efficient test and to get good results. That's kind of where I'm messing around with stuff right now, is trying to figure out how to do that.
Nice. I wouldn't. I guess I don't know really what to expect from a lot of this stuff, but I am a little surprised to hear like how long some of that takes. Like, wow. So we have a question from Twitch. Random Slurpiness is wondering for you, Kelly. What do you find is the biggest bottleneck in your workflow? Memory, CPU cores, VRAM, etc. He's asking because he helps some other game developers with system suggestions.
For the game developer side, what most people have come to me about is times for building shaders, and mainly building shaders. That's the like real brutal one, or potentially building the lighting of complex scenes if you're not using ray tracing. Those are like the biggest bottlenecks.
So would for just because I'm kind of uneducated in this, what are shaders and I know a little bit about the lighting part. I know you've talked about that, but
Mhm.
just kind of touch on the shader part. Like, why
Okay.
is that so important?
So a shader is so you probably know what a texture is. Just,
Sure,
2D
just the
image
wrapper around
that's
a.
yeah.
Mhm.
So a shader is the material properties of a s- the properties of a material. So it's going to
Oh,
be a combination of multiple textures.
mhm.
It's going to be kind of visual effects, any kind of other stuff that happens to that material when it gets rendered.
Okay.
So it's a whole node of stuff, and that's a shader.
Oh,
Essentially, there's a little bit
interesting.
more nuance to it, but yeah, things have moved well beyond just to throw a texture on it to being like, no, it's wood plus it has this normal map
Oh,
and specularity and all these other materials. Plus it has this
yeah.
kind of sheen, or like when like say if something is selectable, maybe it has like that glow to it in a game. Like
Okay.
that's all built into the shader of
Ah, I remember when the Source engine was brand spanking new,
Mhm,
and I think during a demo they had somebody like walking across the different floor materials. It was
mhm,
basically the same floor, but they had applied a different texture, or I suppose now a shader, and it was like
mhm,
it would clink if it was metal, or it would thud if it was wood,
mhm,
and it would like the wood would could disintegrate, where the metal would just create sparks. And so
mhm.
that sort of information is built into the shader.
Usually the sound effects is not,
Okay.
but it's kind of that similar thing. Like it's the properties of the
Oh.
visual properties of the material.
Okay. Okay. Neat.
Yeah.
Um.
So like
Cool.
building those, a
Sorry.
lot of times a game developer will have to rebuild all of the shaders
Mm.
um, in the game, and that could be thousands and thousands of shaders. Like some of
Wow.
the test scenes that I was doing my GPU testing on, it's like one little map, but it has 6,000 shaders. Um,
Whoa.
so like it's a lot of information, and it could take a lot of time.
Yeah. That's cool. Ash Loki would like you to know that he's very thankful for Puget covering viewport and usability metrics. So many of us are building work of which rendering and exporting are only a part. So
Mhm.
right on. Let's see. Huh. How is there a good crossover from like some of the game development I suppose experience and background with the visual production? Or virtual production?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of crossover. Like it's using the same game development pipeline. It's
Okay.
just not like it's the final product is just a little different, is all. So instead of having to worry about this wide range of lower end hardware and trying to make things efficient and trying to make it run as smoothly as possible, it's about how much can we get out of this engine for these 30 frames every second to make it look as beautiful as possible. Um,
Okay.
it's just a little different from uh, a little bit different of like end goal. You also
Okay.
don't, the virtual production doesn't have to worry about, usually they don't have to worry about compiling the source code or packaging up a final product. They can just run it through the engine. A few of the other things they don't have to worry about that game developers do, but that's more on the CPU side.
Oh, okay. Have you found anything really kind of interesting or exciting, something that you weren't expecting in all of this?
Um, I think the biggest surprise to me going into Unreal, because I came to
Mhm.
Unreal from the game dev side, like we said.
Right.
Biggest surprise to me was how many Unreal users are using Quadro cards. It's
Oh.
actually quite a bit. If you're not in the game space,
Uh
a
huh.
lot of them are using Quadro for architecture,
Oh.
for virtual production is a lot of Quadro. If you're doing, it's almost required if you are doing multiple systems trying to run a big LED volume,
Oh, sure.
or you have a camera that you need to sync up with the rendering of the in the engine. It's
That's
pretty
pretty
much
cool.
required because that's the only them support sync cards. They have a little special
Right.
physical port on the card that you need. So I was not expecting that to be as big of a deal as it is, but it's pretty much
Yeah,
required.
that's pretty cool. Oh, Random Slurpiness from Twitch has another question. Do you normally have a single-use system compiling then testing, or do you compile on one machine then test on a different machine?
For myself, we
Let's go two angles. Let's say in a normal workflow, would a person usually have one system to do both, or two, and then also for your particular interest?
so usually it's going to
Because I
depend
know
on
he's coming from that game dev kind of
yeah.
angle, so I'm curious. I'm curious from your own work, and then also maybe an industry standard, I suppose.
Throughout the industry, it's going to just depend on the size of the studio, really.
Okay.
If you're a large game studio, there's going to be certain people doing certain tasks. So they'll be breaking up to do whatever. Whereas a smaller, like especially a lot of the virtual production space is like maybe a couple of guys throwing together
Sure.
some stuff. Like sometimes they're pretty small teams. Well, and there's like large teams on the whole set, but
Sure.
they like the 3D guys are smaller people. So they might just be all doing it the same or using one machine to do everything. For us at Puget, I'm pretty much doing most of the development off of my home system, which is a little slow. I have a 7700, I think.
Oh, that's not bad.
I mean, it's pretty good, but like for some of the stuff that we're trying to do, it's not great. Like for running games, it's fantastic, but for trying to compile 6,000 shaders, it leaves me a little wanting. So for that, then I will VPN into work and use we have 10 or 12 systems on IP KVMs, so I can control them over the internet all the way down to BIOS level access.
Okay.
And then I'll run. So when I do a lot of the CPU testings, I've actually been doing that, and then use like a 3950X or whatever is it free, whatever someone else is not using, and do some testing off that. But then, well, basically I'll compile on that system and do all the benchmarking in the system, go to the next system, compile everything, benchmark everything, go to the next system, compile, benchmark. Because like we're trying to test the compiling time. So I have to do everything on each system so I know what it does. But like in a real life workflow in a studio, you're probably going to have someone else compiling, someone else doing all this stuff.
I see. So we do have another question from YouTube. Zanzo Gaming, I'm going to go with. He's asking if we've tried the new 3080, 3090 for the kind of workload we're talking about, and I think that's a yes. And so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we just published all the benchmark results for our 3080, 3090 testing. For kind of covers architectural visualization, virtual production, a little bit of game development style stuff. It's a bit of a generic.
That's all in your Unreal Engine 4.25 3080, 3090 performance article?
That is correct.
Okay.
So yeah, we went through that for the higher end workloads. No like game.
Yeah, plenty enough people do that.
Yeah, that's not our thing.
Yeah.
It's fasting games. Like, well, I don't know what else you need to know.
Yeah, you go to Gamers Nexus for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I like the virtual studio kind of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of been a thing for maybe longer than we might expect, but I feel like right now it's becoming so like reachable for a broader spectrum of just everybody. Like I could make it look like I'm anywhere if I really wanted to and wasn't on my laptop.
Right. Had a good camera.
Right.
Yeah. Like the virtual
That's super cool.
Like that kind of like news style sports broadcasting type stuff is just, it's exploding. Like everyone, like if you turn on a sports broadcast, they're probably not sitting in whatever room you think they're sitting in. They're probably sitting at a desk in front of a green screen.
That's so cool.
I saw this one really cool thing for some tennis tournament that just happened. I can't remember which one it was. Like the French Open, I think. But so they have the reporter interviewing the winner, but the reporter was not at the Open. They're at whatever place they're at. And then the player was at the stadium shot by a green screen. And then
that's cool.
They're just like full body shot and they're just standing there facing each other, having a conversation, but it looks like they're standing on a set together, but they're not in the same room at all.
Wow.
And then like they even show like the actual studio that the anchor is in. And it's like a 10-foot by 10-foot square green screen, like as 2 walls and a floor.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they're LED walls and floor. And then, so the system will see that, and then anything past where it cuts off, like they can pan past where the LED stops. But because it's all controlled by Unreal just fills in everything else. You can't tell. So the shot is actually like the person that's the Tennis Pro is like not really on where that LED volume would be. It's off the side, but it's just all being composited in real time.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Like they're opening up all kinds of things. So like the news people could just be in a trailer with, you know, a camera pointing at a green screen and it looks like they're doing whatever. They're just outside the stadium, but they could talk to someone that's in the stadium and no big deal. Yeah.
That's super cool. So Zanzo brings up mentions compared to Quadro, and I noticed that those aren't in your results testing here.
So we don't typically directly compare GeForce to Quadro. I was also waiting for the Ampere Quadro to come out. Okay. So that's being announced on Monday. So hopefully that'll give us a better, well, I assume it's being announced. That's when GTC is. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, NVIDIA sent out a big thing about come see us and blah, blah. So I'm hoping we get some information about when that's going to happen. Yeah. And that will determine if I'm going to wait to test the current generation Quadro or if I'll just do that now. And then if it's like 3 or 4 months down the road before we actually see the Ampere Quadro, then I'll redo it then to compare the new stuff. So it was kind of just like it's not really a fair comparison because they're like, if you need a Quadro, you're going to get a Quadro regardless of the performance. Like you can't you can't sync the LED monitor and the camera and the system together on a 3090. You can with a Quadro. So like if that's what you need, you have to have a Quadro.
But which Quadro do you get?
Well, I mean, you get the biggest one you can. I mean, honestly, for virtual production, and architecture, the 8000 is really popular just because of VRAM. Like, the 6 is like really good. 8's better because VRAM. So yeah, it's not a total fair apples to apples comparison. But I understand people want that information. I'm just trying to like not redo my testing, a whole bunch in a row since NVIDIA already staggered the 3000 series launch so much. I have to redo it again here and whenever they decide to actually release the 3070.
That's here pretty soon, isn't it? Like the 12th or something, I think I saw.
They just pushed it back to the end of October.
Yeah, you reminded me. The headline I saw was a delay for it. That's what it was. Yeah. Oh. Woo-hoo.
Yeah. So, then. So, yeah.
Man.
So, and then. Yeah.
Um, 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 Someone had mentioned this was more directed something I saw on social media directed to us, but maybe since I have you here, you can give some insight. Have we seen any instability with the cards that we've been testing so far? I know that that's been a bit of an issue. There's been some kind of hubbub surrounding capacitors, I think it is.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. We have not in labs,
Hmm.
but we've only had the Gigabyte and the Founders Edition is the only ones we have
Okay.
tested.
Okay.
We would have to check with Josh on product qualification to see if he's the one that tests the other brands,
Okay.
see if they've had anything. But in labs, we haven't seen any stability issues. A lot of the stability issues people are reporting are related to overclocking,
That's
and
what I've
we
heard.
don't use overclocked cards, or well, I guess we do like factory overclocked, but nothing crazy.
We don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Founders Edition wasn't really having that problem. And then I guess there's a
Okay.
new driver out that's supposed to fix a lot of it anyways.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't have any experience with crashing yet.
Okay. Cool. I wasn't sure how to answer it myself when that came up, so
And
I
even up
appreciate
in
it.
labs, we've had like 3 cards. Like we haven't done a
Yeah.
lot. So like we don't like it worked. And so people that have the cards that work, they just work. And
Yeah.
all of ours are okay so far.
Right on. Curious, what are you most excited for in the future of your little niche here? Like, what are you looking forward to?
Um, just the way uh, Unreal and for that matter, Unity have just like exploded well beyond a game engine. It's now
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
whole thing. It's a software package that can do so much. And like, this is what we're doing already. Like, I can't imagine what else is down the road for these engines. Like, just as more and more horsepower becomes available, they're just like more and more crazy things are going to happen. They keep opening up so much of both engines to let developers do more things with them. Like, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen everything from um, Fox was using Unreal Engine to populate stadiums that are empty
Oh,
because of
right.
COVID. So, like, instead of
Hmm.
having fans there, they just have fake people. Like, just all these crazy random uses. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that works.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know. I've noticed too, and think they've again. This is something I think they've been doing for a really long time. But I think like a lot of the overlays,
Hmm.
especially with sports, like there'll be like a little ring that follows somebody
Hmm.
so that they can. It's not just they're not just drawing yellow circles on the screen anymore. Like
Right.
heck, even ads. There's like certain having been to the stadiums in the past, you'll see like a panel that's green, and you're like,
Hmm.
what the heck? Or they can just paste over the in-house ads on the television.
Yeah.
I imagine that's very similar sort of use
Yeah.
case
There's
there.
all kinds of crazy things like, and that's not to say that like green screen filming and post rendering and all that kind of stuff is going away by any means. It's just
Hmm.
opening up another tool for the filmmakers or videographers or whoever to do something.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine that final scene of Avengers Endgame where like it's a huge green screen, there's people jumping on things, and there's
Right.
like 30 actors on set. Like, you're not going to do that in an LED volume. Like, you're going to have to comp out all that foreground stuff anyways and put
Mm,
stuff there. So like, you're you're going to have to do the rendering either way. So live playback is not really an option,
I see.
or wouldn't be, because like, how are you gonna, like, the guy that jumps on the back of one of it's like the really big guy that not
Hulk?
Thanos, but one of Thanos's henchmen, the really huge
Oh,
guy.
yeah,
There's
I
like
know the guy you mean.
they like jump on the guy's back and do something, but like
Hmm.
that actor's not there. It's just like a green screened like thing for the guy to jump on.
Oh,
So
weird.
like, they have to like comp that out anyways. Like, you can't put a CG character to interact with the physical character in live. playback is just
Okay.
not going to work, you know. So there's going to be the old way is not going away, but who knows? Someone's going to come up with some crazy thing, and it's like, oh my god, they did a CG character, but it's real, and yeah, who
Right.
knows?
Huh. Yeah, I could almost see where it would be, you know, how they've done like a morph suit with some kind of crazy framework
Hmm.
for a larger person, where they'll do that in post. They can see where maybe they might do something similar. Uh,
Yeah.
I suppose live, but it gets a little weird. Like it has to make sense, you
Yeah.
know, for the application.
Well, a lot of
So
times they have to go in and like digitally move the actors, like the real actor's arm or hair or whatever, to physically interact correctly with the rendered thing.
yeah,
So, like in doing it live is really hard to make things exactly correct, you know,
hmm,
because otherwise your arm's gonna be floating when it's like the green screen's too far out or it's sinking in, and yeah,
hmm.
but it's just another tool that some genius filmmakers can do something crazy with at some point.
Yeah, I am really excited to see the future of virtual production. I think it's going to be just really big. I think it's we're going to see a lot of interesting use cases for it. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I can see a lot of it being used for television. I think more than film. I think,
yeah,
but
possibly.
yeah. Um, I guess maybe you can help with this one. Not quite on topic, but the Nether Sleeper's having issues. Sometimes when he moves windows around, they lag behind a ton. Any ideas why this might be happening? He goes on to say, it can't be my processor or RAM as I have a 6600K and 32 gigs.
Uh, no, I'm not sure. There could be so many things.
Yeah.
Depends on like what else is running in the background. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
the system specs don't look suspicious, so
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Sorry. If
Check
you
it
have a
out, but
Puget system, call up support.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
that's who I would call if I when I have problems. I'm like, hey, Ben, what's wrong with my computer?
uh, what's been so you mentioned? I think you mentioned. I don't know if it was before we started or during the stream so far. But what's been? I think actually maybe you've mentioned this before on a previous stream. But I know the programming side of this, actually like creating the code for the benchmark, has been a new experience.
Hmm.
And but has there been any other aspect of this world that has been, I guess, a roadblock or something that you've kind of had to figure out? Any sort of advice or technical issue that came up that you weren't expecting?
Um, Probably the biggest technical issue is um, like when you start getting into these higher end um, virtual production or architectural visualization. I hate that word; it's so hard to say. ArcViz. Um,
Oh, that's what that means. Okay.
yeah, yeah, ArcViz. Um, or sometimes you'll see AEC. That's architecture, engineering, construction.
Okay.
So you'll see that a lot with rendering, with CAD, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, um, the one of the things I've seen with those is because they use such high resolution textures, they use so many materials um, that the VRAM of a card actually becomes really important really fast.
Oh.
Whereas I come from a game design background, which is all about efficiency. Like
Mhm.
you want to reuse a texture as much as possible within a scene, or they'll have like um, they would call them trim sheets, to be like a texture that has like 6 or 7 different like border pieces that tile horizontally. And it's like, this is the trim sheet for this level. If you need that piece for a different level, like you can't use
Mhm.
it because you're gonna have to load that entire texture just for that little strip. So you have to
Oh.
come up with something else. Um, So like that kind of stuff like is very efficiency focused.
Mhm.
On architecture, like one of the architecture scenes I have, the light plate switch, like the light switch on the wall, is 2048 by 2048 texture. Like that's huge. Like a lot of the game dev stuff, like you wouldn't use that for like a light switch might be like 128 pixels by 128 pixels. Like you got a little tiny thing.
Yeah.
They're just used such massive textures
Huh.
that it just adds up really fast because they want like photo realistic, like they want to be able to
Oh,
zoom into something if they need to, like they have a camera move and it passes through something, like they want their customers to know this is a real place.
I
And
see.
if it
I
looks
see.
like a video game, then they're gonna be like, this, I don't like it.
Huh.
So yeah, several of the scenes like didn't like anything other than the 3090 because it would crash in 4K,
Hmm.
because it would just run out of video memory.
Okay. Dang. Huh. I wonder if there is a way to make that more efficient, though. I mean, does it have to
Oh yeah,
be so? I mean, it seems like
it
just
just
a
comes
brute
down
force
to,
way.
yeah, it just comes down to what they want to spend their time doing.
Hmm.
And a lot of times like they're just getting these high resolution scans that are um, the texture, the like color information, bump map, the reflectiveness, the bellness, all that, those different parts that come into a shader. They're getting these high resolution scans and they're just like plugging it in and going. Like they don't want to
Oh.
spend time optimizing for the scene that they're going to have to redo a totally different scene in 6 months when the project's done, and like just
Hmm.
do it over. So they just want, you know, use what they have that's high resolution and get it going.
I see.
So yeah, if it was a game, they would then do another pass of everything to change texture sizes. Um, there's tools in Unreal that will show you what's called textile density, which is like
Okay.
um, how much of the texture is showing, like per, it's like texture versus pixel is textile
Okay.
density. So like there's no reason to have a 2048 texture that takes up no more than 128 pixels on a screen. Like you're just wasting
Oh,
information. So like if
sure.
you know this texture is not going to get any closer than a certain distance, therefore it won't take up more than so many pixels, that's kind of what you should be looking at. And the
Hmm.
engine will like compare everything to make sure that it's all comparable. Um,
Okay.
so there are optimization tools that a game developer will go through because that's like critical to them.
Sure.
It's just not important to architecture,
All right. Huh.
especially if you can just be like, oh, I'll pay a couple extra thousand for this video card and then I'll have to spend, 5 times that amount of money going through each scene to optimize it. Like it's
Sure.
just, yeah.
Huh. Let's see. Ash Loki has a question from YouTube. I've been experimenting with dynamic textures in Blender/Maya. Would that sort of solution work going forward into the future of ridiculous resolutions? Clarifies, just to be clear, I mean using the node system to generate textures.
Yeah, that's gonna be the future at some point. That's like Maya, Blender both do that a lot. That's the whole basis behind Substance Designer. Um, you can get just crazy, realistic looking textures without using a photo. It's all procedurally generated. Um, they're just very computationally expensive at this point. So
Mm.
maybe at some point we'll get to the place where we can compute that much information that quickly. But if you were to put that much computational need into these 6,000 shaders that are in a level, like it's
Hmm.
just going to bog down any system. Like it's going to be hard to calculate all that constantly.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, eventually that's probably where we're going to go. Just like we had to force our way into um, photo-based rendering, and
Hmm.
then force our way into ray tracing.
Right.
Like those are just more accurate ways of getting rendering. So eventually we'll go to having node-based being real time, but it's just not there yet.
Ah, okay. Where I suppose where's the bottleneck for that then? Is it CPU, GPU? It's a
I believe those are CPU bound
okay.
right now.
Hmm.
Not to say they couldn't be GPU, but I think I'm pretty sure they're all CPU calculated.
Okay.
They're very linear, basically, because like you have this node graph and you have to like calculate these nodes and then these
Mhm.
nodes and then these nodes, and then like it has to go in order, and it's based on what happened with the node before. So
Oh
you can't
yeah,
just throw
that
tons of
sounds
cores at it because they have to be calculated in order. Um, yeah, it'll eventually get there, but it's just a ways out.
all right. That's pretty cool. Huh. Let's see. What? Let's see. I kind of ran out of questions. I had a few prepared. Uh, I'm just. I guess I'm kind of curious. Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Anything interesting and cool, or
um
um,
I'm not sure. So Unreal has an update coming out that is going to shift the light baking from CPU to GPU, which
oh, okay.
should help a lot, I hope. It's
Right.
kind of interesting because the biggest draw to baking lighting is for non-ray traced scenarios, like
Okay.
especially like if you're doing a mobile game, or you're trying to support older hardware that doesn't have ray tracing or whatever, which is still a huge market. Like there's
Oh,
a lot of
sure.
reason not to do ray tracing. Um, but in order to do um, the light baking on the GPU, you need a RTX video card. So
Oh, okay.
seems a little odd, but yeah, you have to have the hardware so that way your customers don't. Um, but
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
it should. Which I mean, developers are used to having the crazy system to support lower end systems. Like you need to have the better system than what you're going to develop for. Um, so it should dramatically increase this the time for that, which will help. They're also adding a few other GPU enhancements. Um, they've been talking a long time about adding um, SLI support into Unreal. I'm curious where that's going to go now. Like they've been saying, like it's happening. We're working on it. Blah blah. But now that
Yeah.
NVIDIA has basically stepped out of the picture for
Yeah.
supporting in SLI, I'm curious if what Unreal will do, because on one side, for the game side, it's pretty much irrelevant now. Like there's no
Yeah.
reason to go forward with that. However, on the architecture side or the virtual production side, they would probably use all the horsepower they can put into a system. Like you give them more
Oh,
horsepower, they'll use it.
sure.
So it'll be interesting to see if Unreal or if Epic will decide to add support in or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because like on one side they'll probably want to support that side, but also they probably want to tell the game creators like don't worry about SLI. Like it's just not worth it. But if it's baked
Yeah.
into the engine, then what do you do? I don't know.
Sure. Is there really? So my initial question was like, what would the advantage there be, or be there with SLI? Because I think, if I recall correctly, Don has mentioned that, or Doctor Don has mentioned that in the near future, and maybe this only applies to the scientific machine learning stuff, that the video cards will be able to communicate via the PCI bus. They could bypass the whole go into the CPU and back and stuff. And oh, Don's here actually. Cool. So maybe I'm misremembering, but I
Yeah,
know.
we can't do that yet, I don't think.
Okay.
At least as far as sharing the video memory.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, Don would probably know better than me.
Sure.
Um, but
And
that's
so
one
that's
of the
the
biggest draws for um, for virtual production would be
Mhm.
to share that video memory. Because like I said, we had people that were buying RTX 8000s solely for the VRAM. So that's like a
Mhm.
$8,000 card just because they want the VRAM.
Yeah.
So if they could, use two 3090s and get the same amount of VRAM for $3,000, like they're
Mhm.
going to jump all over that.
Sure.
And then not to mention whatever Quadro does with their high end.
Yeah.
Like, because as resolution scales up,
Mhm.
the amount of VRAM that you need goes for the exact same assets you have in the scene.
Right.
So if you think 4K is really hard, now you have these massive LED walls and ceiling
Oh,
and
right.
everything that you're trying to power. Like currently those actually aren't very high resolution.
Right.
But they could get higher resolution.
Wow.
And then you just need more power, which means more VRAM. So like people would use it.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what they have, because like they actually added SLI support with this new update, but only for video output from the other cards. So the second card, you're not sharing resources. It's not doing any computation. It will just match the frame buffer, so you can split the frame into 8 different outputs instead of 4, or however many are on the back of a video card.
Sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a limited version of SLI.
I wonder if we'll see
kind of a waste, because like now you're not using, like, if you put two 3090s in and one of your 3090s isn't actually doing anything, that's a lot of money.
Well, I wonder because it over these last 3 generations, I guess, since the 10, the 20, and now the 30 series, it seems like Nvidia is kind of taking away the SLI from, or the NVLink from, their consumer-centric cards. It feels like, especially with the application you were just saying, like maybe they're trying to put it, kind of force people toward their Quadro card in order to take advantage of the sharing and the resource ability of that. Yeah.
I don't know that that's for certain the case, but it
Tinfoil hat.
does seem suspicious. Like I feel like a lot of NVIDIA's choices with physical card designs over the last couple generations have been an attempt to force people to Quadro that have not been using the cards that way.
Yeah.
Huh. Just in case anyone from NVIDIA is watching, love you.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, and I don't.
Cards.
I don't think it's unfair to say, because even back with the 10 series cards, they made it very clear that there was a distinction between consumer cards and workstation cards, and so I feel like now they're just really putting their foot down. They're which, hey, that's it's their business and stuff. That's fine. Yeah. I don't say that with any sort of judgment, I guess. Random Slurpiness asks, do you value ECC memory in your systems, or just the fastest memory your system can support?
ECC doesn't really come into play a whole lot for any of the stuff that I use. And we only support whatever the CPU manufacturer says that the CPU supports. So even though it can use up to like 4066 or whatever, I don't even know what the numbers are, like the official documentation for Ryzen, Threadripper, Intel all says like supports up to 2933 or 2666 or whatever. So like that's all that we use. And that is more of a Josh question as well. Like I don't know the details on RAM speeds.
Sure.
I'm more of the software expert.
Yeah. We have another one from YouTube. Timo TT asks, are Radeon Pro cards any good? And I have noticed there was it wasn't that long ago. There was a bit of a push from AMD for video cards, and they seem to have just like disappeared.
Yeah, we don't really know what happened with Radeon. Like I don't know what they're
The
doing.
7, like the Radeon 7 was supposed to be this hotness, and then there was like 6 of them ever in existence, and then they disappeared.
Yeah, we got one of them, um, and then didn't have a driver that would work with it for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I'm not like that was Matt was working on that one, and like it just kind of fizzled out. I'm They're supposed to be announcing some new stuff coming up end of the month or
Oh
something.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Hopefully they'll do something. I mean, I really want like if they can do with video cards what they did with the CPUs, like who knows what could
Fingers
happen in
crossed,
the
man.
future, you know, like
That'd be super
um
cool.
and at least I don't feel Nvidia has been dragging their feet as much as Intel had been for the past
Mm.
10 years. Like Nvidia is still pushing technology pretty hard,
Oh
whereas
yeah.
Intel has just been like, here's a 10% speed boost this generation. Have fun.
Yeah. If that
Um,
even.
right. So,
We still love you too, Intel.
right. So I'm hoping that the new generation does something cool, especially
Yeah.
if on the Radeon Pro side, if they can put some heat on Nvidia for Quadro, like
Hmm.
bring them prices down or something. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
saying, a little expensive.
$8,000 for what? What's the 8,000 is 128 or something crazy VRAM.
64.
Only 64, and you're paying 8 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Yeah. What do you wish Intel would do? Just more than the 10% yearly thing? I suppose. Although I feel like maybe that's a little unfair. I feel like we've reached a point, like a almost an honest to goodness physical limitation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the the arms race is about to begin.
Yeah.
And that's going to be where we start seeing ginormous CPU, or I guess it'd still be a CPU, right? If it's ARM based, performance increases. It'll just be
Yeah.
only because you'll have 400 cores on a thing,
Right.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, the 10900K is like an absolute beast for single threaded workflows, like especially gaming. Like it's really great. But
Sure.
I feel like even that they were pressured from AMD's new chips to start adding more cores and start doing something else.
Yeah.
Um, so hopefully they'll come back with some other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we should hear something at GTC on Monday about Quadros. Dr. Dunn is
Mm-hmm.
saying,
Yeah.
and he's hoping for better pricing as well.
Yeah.
uh,
I'm not holding my
yes,
breath for better pricing, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, I think Nvidia surprised everybody with the pricing on these new cards. I think a lot of people
Well,
were expecting another showing of 20 series. Honestly,
but the 3080 is the same price as the 2080. So
yeah, yeah,
it was just a much better performance increase than we've seen in a long time. But
right.
like it was directly replacing the 2080 and it came out the same price. So
Mm.
and the 3090 is more expensive than the 2080 Ti.
Oh yeah, I guess. Huh. I guess yeah. I guess they were just.
But it's not
I
really a
guess
2080
better
Ti.
than.
It's just a different card. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know
Yeah.
what Nvidia just like does what they feel like doing at the time, and then who knows what happens with next time they do something.
Right. Right. I do. I think people were pleasantly surprised that it wasn't an insane markup. I suppose. Is Oh, here's a good one. Leanne Parma on Twitch. She's asking, is the 3090 the card virtual production and video editing pros we're waiting for?
Um, for the people that don't need Quadro features, they were pretty excited about it. Like
Yeah.
That's the one that more people are in the virtual production group that I'm in. That's the one more people are interested in than the 3080. Again, purely for VRAM.
Yeah. Yeah, because it looks like in some of these tests, I mean, there is a significant performance increase, and is that due to the VRAM? Do you put a lot? Do you attribute a lot of the
No,
3090?
if you compare the difference in CUDA cores, you see about a 15 to 20% increase in the number of cores. And you
Okay.
get about a 15 to 20% increase in performance. So it performs as we would expect just from the paper numbers.
Okay.
But the selling point for paying that much money is VRAM.
Ah.
Like, I think that's what a lot of people were upset about with the 3090, with the cost of it being so much
Yeah.
more than twice the 3080, is that the performance difference isn't that much, but it's really all about VRAM. You
Yeah.
need that to do higher resolutions. You need that for more textures, more stuff in the frame.
Right. Wow. I'm just looking at the chart here you have comparing the specs, and I guess I hadn't realized because it had been mentioned in when it first came out that the 3090 was kind of like the replacement to the Titan, and I can see, okay, 24 gigs of VRAM, about the same boost clock, but those
Mm-hmm.
CUDA cores, man, that's insane. You
Mm-hmm.
got listed here 4,608 on the Titan RTX versus 10,496 on
Yeah.
the 3090. That's nuts. No wonder it crushes the Titan
Yeah.
by almost double from looking at the in
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. And
While
it's
costing $1,000 less,
yeah.
because
Wow.
the Titan RTX is 2,500 and that's 15. I think I could be wrong on my numbers, but yeah, it's a beast of a card. There are some Titan features that did not get transferred to the 3090
Okay.
for some people that need those. That's more of specific industries and stuff, but
Sure.
I think Don would probably know that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I
one
think
of
he
Linus's
had
videos
mentioned
talked about it too, but I don't remember.
just wish I had so I'm gonna have to go for the 3090. Yeah, I mean, if oh, so VR6 Doug, he comments the V-Ray rendering performance of the 3080 was impressive. Just wish it had more VRAM. Looks like I'm gonna have to go for the 3090. And yeah, if that's what you need, you're
Yep.
gonna have
Because
to.
if you're trying to load everything in your scene into VRAM, you got a lot of stuff. You're gonna need more VRAM.
Yeah. Garrett Reviews on YouTube asks, how is game development changing because of the new standards for graphics cards?
So in the long run, stuff like ray tracing is going to dramatically improve game development and give you much better results, much faster. You don't have to worry about baking lighting. You don't have to worry about generating cube maps for reflections. Your reflections aren't limited to either screen space or cube maps. It's going to dramatically improve the process, which will then make games easier to make them better, blah blah. It's going to take a while for that to really kick in, because they have to now support RTX cards and all the video cards out there that do not have ray tracing. So they still have to do the old school way in addition to the ray tracing way.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a while before it's a real major change. But I mean, just some of the graphics, like in Control and some of the new Battlefield games, like they look great when you're using ray tracing and stuff. So it'll definitely improve things. It's going to be a long time before it's like industry wide. The thing I'm more interested about right now, maybe it's just because ray tracing is now 2 years old and old school. Who cares about it anymore? Everyone's ray tracing. Is the NVIDIA had announced this technology a while ago, but now the Xbox Series X and the new PlayStation are both implementing it, even
Uh-huh.
though they're not using NVIDIA. Basically allowing stuff in storage to go directly to the video card instead of going through
Oh,
CPU and RAM, then to the video card, then back out. Like it's a direct connection, which will make
whoa.
things load much, much faster.
Wow.
And will eliminate the little pop in when if you're going fast through an environment, you see things just suddenly appear.
Yeah.
Um, they'll eliminate that kind of stuff.
The elevator loading scenes.
Yeah, it'll kind of eliminate a lot of those because you won't have to force a loading screen.
Wow.
So talking about elevator loading screens, I heard this funny story about Bethesda when they made Morrowind on the original Xbox, like the
Yeah.
original Xbox.
Mhm.
Microsoft showed them a way that like they could put up a loading screen and then reboot the Xbox in the background to be able to clear out the RAM so they could then load in stuff. So a lot of the loading screens in Morrowind is actually like rebooting your Xbox so that it could like load in new stuff. It was like faster to do that than to just load things. Like game developers are crazy. They will do just amazing things to make things work the way they want it to work.
That's crazy. Huh. Well, right on. Well, actually, on that bombshell, I think I love that. Yeah, so we are just a little over our hour, and I think that's an interesting little factoid to end on. Thank you very much for that, Kelly. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or shout out or just real quick before we go?
Nothing specific. If any of you use Unreal, want to know have a specific use case that you want to see some benchmarking on, please let me know. You can find me on Twitter at what is my Twitter handle? Yeah,
KW Shipman on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess or confused because like that was my old school handle, and then when I got hired at Puget, it's just like K Shipman. They didn't have the W in there, and so like you guys are forgetting like okay, which one, who's where. KW Shipman on Twitter, and let me know what you want, and I'll see what I can do.
Do it, yeah. Help shape the future of Puget benchmarks. So we'll say goodbye. Thanks, Kelly, for taking time out of the day to join us and give a little insight into the world that you're working in. And thank you to the audience as well for joining us. We do this every Wednesday and Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Wednesdays we bring in industry experts to talk about their process and tips and tricks, things like that. Fridays, like today, we bring our own industry expert or sort of software expert in to talk about stuff and take questions from you guys. So thank you very much. Mark your calendars, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
All right.